Welcome to the Story 516 podcast, where we sit down with Christians from across denominations and talk about how God is at work in the world today and inspire you to see God at work in your own life in new ways. Well, welcome back to the Story 516 podcast. I'm your host, Zach, and joining me today is a friend of mine, Caleb Zander.
Hello.
Hi, glad you can make it. I've known Caleb for probably about a couple years now, close to it.
As long as you've been going to Heartland, I think.
Yeah, and you somewhat recently got a job change and now work as a firefighter.
Correct, yeah.
So why don't you tell people just a little bit about yourself, like a little bio?
Little bio. I'm almost born and raised North Dakotan and from Fargo area. Was homeschooled most of my education, then graduated from high school a West Fargo public high school. Then from NDSU with a psychology degree, worked in autism and behavioral health for autism field. Married my wife in 2019, shortly after we graduated college, goodness. And then we recently have our first child, in the end of May, right when I was graduating from Fire Academy. So I've been working for the city of Fargo as a firefighter since February of this year. Also have done an internship with Heartland Community Church that we both go to. I've spoke there recently on a Sunday morning. Have interest in being a bivocational minister in the future. We'll see where God takes that.
I was experiencing your journey into like Fire Academy and stuff kind of from the outside, where I'd see you come talk about all the schoolwork and studying and what your new schedule is, where you have like multiple days on, sometimes multiple days off. I was just like, this sounds chaotic. But just hearing kind of your background here, I was just struck by kind of the word patience. So I was like, you went to psychology degree.
Yep, close.
You got a psychology degree and then spent time working with behavioral kids, like autism and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And now going through a very intense fire academy.
Yeah.
And now having this crazy schedule, I'm just like, patience must be something that either you have or you had to adapt.
Yeah, I would say so. School wasn't, college was a tough pill to finish. But yeah, once I was through, I started working with kids with autism during college, as kind of, it was a flexible schedule to kind of work these, before and after class shifts, just assisting kids with daily lives. And these kids, it was a good job, and I didn't mind working with the kids and their parents. But yeah, it definitely opens your eyes to a different world that a lot of people don't see. And yeah, I think I definitely grew in patience there, but I think I had a decent amount to start with, like you're saying. That's definitely something God has worked on me, is learning how to not only have patience at work, but to have patience to spare when I'm done for my family, because it's not worth it to use it all up, right, and to come home and then be super snappy with my wife or my daughter's only 6 months old, so it's kind of hard to be snappy with her right now, but I'm sure in the future that'll still be something, because with the schedule like you're talking about, it's a shift schedule, so people in like the medical field are really familiar with shift schedules, but where I work a 24-hour shift. We do it's called a Kelly schedule. So we work a day on, a day off, a day on, a day off, and then we have 4 days off. So it's a 9-day rotation with 2 other shifts. And so it does allow for rest and downtime. But if you don't sleep the night before and you maybe have a bunch of stuff to do and you don't end up getting a nap, like, you have to really be on your guard to maintain some self-control and to not allow those emotions to override how you treat people and the people you care about and that you live with.
Do you find the work itself, like, even beyond just maybe getting less sleep, is the work itself extra stressful?
Initially, it was very stressful, and it can be. It depends on the day. So the benefit of responding to emergencies is that they're never going to be the same, and no day is ever the same. So initially, I struggled a lot with anxiety over performance. I was talking with we see a trauma therapist once a year. And my first time seeing her, I was just expressing this anxiety and how to manage it because I knew it'd get better with time the more comfortable I got with my job and the more comfortable I got with the skills required. But she basically was able to like very quickly identify that the type of anxiety I have is when I'm expected to perform in front of people in some way or just perform in general. To complete something that maybe I'm not super comfortable with. Yeah, I would say that, initially this job was very stressful for me. And as I'm growing more confident in skills and more competent, the stress is going down.
Do you feel like your interactions with working with people with autism help prepare you just in general, even beyond just being a firefighter, to prepare you to interact with just all sorts of individuals?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, we tend to respond to the same people frequently, the frequent flyers of the emergency medical services. And so I think being able to have that patience for people who maybe seem like they're trying to take advantage of you, or when maybe they aren't, maybe they can't. There's something there, right, that you can't necessarily see or identify that could be causing those issues. I think that definitely does translate. Thankfully, I work with a team and we work together. You know, there's always at least 3 people, sometimes 4 on a crew, and we work together to solve these problems and to deal with these people. Plus, we have the ambulance crew, so sometimes there's up to six or more people in a room, which can be a little overwhelming for that person. But if they are in critical need of care, that is always a benefit to have more people. But yeah, I think going back to your initial comment on patience, I think learning how to maintain a professional mindset and demeanor in the face of something frustrating was definitely a skill I learned from that previous career and will continue in this one as I move up and gain more responsibility in this field, in this department.
And you mentioned feeling called, if I may use that language, into ministry at some point. I know in conversations we've had, you've mentioned that. And I'm curious, are there aspects through working with behavioral people and then also just having to be on your toes and interact with different situations every day now as a firefighter? Do you see any carryover that maybe God's shown you, I'm preparing you, or might be using it to kind of help shape you?
Yeah, not to say anything negatively about full-time ministers of any kind. I would not go so far as to say anything negative about that. However, I do see that it is very easy to become disconnected from ordinary people when you are fully enveloped in ministry and in church events and functions and other church people and other ministers, and like when you do your cohorts and stuff like that as ministers. So I think unless you are extremely intentional about not becoming disconnected, it can be easy to fall into that. And so if and when I do become bivocational in as a minister and as in some sort of pastoral role, I do think that maintaining that bivocational ministry will, one, allow me to support myself in that endeavor, and I would not be a financial burden on a church, or financial burden on my family, not being able to provide with them, a smaller salary from a church, but also to maintain just the knowledge of how ordinary life is and how life outside of ministry is, and the struggles and the frustrations that your typical person working a job has, and that I wouldn't lose sight of that and be able to relate to people a lot better, hopefully.
Yeah, and I think even beyond just full-time ministers, if you're a full-time business person or full-time, whatever you're doing, I would say probably the majority of people have jobs where they are segmented away from at least certain groups of people. So it's interesting seeing the jobs you've taken in your life where they've almost forced you to be amongst people and interact with people that a lot of us do everything in our power to avoid.
That is an interesting observation. I don't know if I'd quite made that connection before.
Yeah, so that's interesting to kind of think about and be challenged with it in our own life, that Jesus intentionally sought out the dregs of society, if I could.
The outcasts.
Be crude. The outcasts. That's probably a more polite way of saying it. And how many of us just have our own little clique of friends or our own business professional circles that we frequent.
Right.
And don't interact with some of those outcasts. I work in a public school, and you see those behavioral kids on a daily basis.
Absolutely.
And it makes me wonder what their life is like. What if there's anything I can do? There are obviously limits in any job as to how much impact you're even allowed to have into someone's life. But something as simply as acknowledging them, trying to be friendly.
Humanizing. Yeah. As best as possible. Yeah.
Not being like, oh, I can't wait till they leave. Or I can't wait till that kid graduates so they're in a different school and not my problem anymore. Even if you have that thought, it's like you can still be nice to someone and greet them by name, learn their name.
Well, and that's really tough because, again, this is something I need to make sure I'm really conscious that I don't lose, because we just recently had a problem person in our service area die. And I almost hate to say it, but it was moderately celebrated that this person was no longer an issue, which is sad. It made me sad that I was almost happy about it too, because this person, had a lot of problems. But the thing we see in the fire service, like in the emergency medical service in general, is people don't take care of themselves, and then we tend to lack empathy because we can very easily point to the fact that you didn't take care of yourself. You didn't exercise. You didn't eat even remotely like possibly healthy. You just laid in bed and felt sorry for yourself. And now you're 400 pounds, or now you have all this anxiety, or now you have all these issues, when we know, because we do it to take care of ourselves. We exercise, and we know that we need these things so that we can function. And we know that you ended up there because you didn't do these things. And so it's hard to maintain that empathy when the person did that themselves. And then they cause problems for you because they repeatedly call, sometimes more than once during a day, for issues that you shouldn't have to deal with, because we're here for emergencies. And these are not really emergencies most of the time. Yeah. And again, maybe they're only emergencies because you did it to yourself. And so it's really tough to maintain. Again, we're very professional in that moment with that person, and we try to make sure they have the best care possible, and that we maintain professionalism and dignity and empathy in the moment. But once we get back to the truck, sometimes that falls apart. So that is something that can be tough and maybe eye-opening for someone listening and learning about the emergency medical service.
Yeah, because people in that field are constantly interacting with new people all the time, and in very uncomfortable, vulnerable states or unpleasant states of being.
Right.
Recently on the podcast, I had talked about expectations and how a lot of times our expectations are what lead to a bad day. Like if my expectation, like I was talking with Jared last time about expectations going into the holiday season. So if I have this idealistic version of Christmas and it doesn't perfectly fit that, I'm disappointed, even if it was a perfectly fine Christmas, perfectly nice Christmas. And I think sometimes expectations in terms of our own growth as people, like our own spiritual growth, can harm us. Because I might go into a situation being like, well, I shouldn't think negatively about these kids. Like when this kid goes to the next grade and they leave my school, and I should be sad or something, like as a Christian. But I think that expectation can be harmful because then you're always just going to be beating yourself up.
A lot of unnecessary guilt.
Yeah. When we could reframe it and be like, oh, I'm catching myself, maybe getting happy that I don't have to deal with what I described a problem anymore.
Right.
But you can use that and be like, oh, maybe I could pray for them, or maybe I can learn from this experience and be like, okay, I'm maybe not where I want to be, but that's okay. It's a step on the journey.
Yeah, and it can also just be a season, right? A season of time and a season of life. And I interacted with this person and hopefully made some sort of positive impact. And now it's time to move on. And that, I think, having that mindset can be really okay too, because then you can avoid that guilt and use it, right? What lessons can I learn? And not everything has to be a lesson either. I think there can be a lot of pressure that you have to learn something from everything.
Right.
And sometimes you just did something and it just was, and that's okay too.
Well, I know you like working out, kind of maintaining a healthy lifestyle. So sometimes a situation might just be another rep.
Yep.
And it's not this like, oh, I'm starting this new exercise routine, or I'm going to add, this is really ambitious, but I'm going to add a minute to my planking time.
Ooh, yeah, that'd be tough.
My stomach's already hurting
Yeah.
with that one. But it doesn't have to be this like benchmark. It
Right.
could just be another rep. Maybe you interacting with this kid with autism, or this person you were called out on an emergency call to. Maybe there's nothing like monumental about it, but it's practice. It's practice at empathy, practice at being Christ to that person.
Just a little bit better.
Yeah. And I think like this whole conversation about like patience, empathy, all these things kind of come from our upbringing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's good to have those foundational morals and ethics kind of built in, ideas that helped shape us.
Mm-hmm.
So for those listening who are maybe have heard what we've talked about with like empathy, patience, and want to pursue that to a more intentional degree in their own life, would you have even just like a tip to like get them started?
I think just putting yourself in uncomfortable situations intentionally to grow. And I think that starts with, again, taking care of yourself. Because if you are of sound mind and body and feels at least moderately comfortable in your own skin and feel somewhat confident in how you appear, I think that can go a long ways into how you treat other people as well. Because if you aren't self-conscious and if you aren't, if you don't feel poorly about yourself, I think it's a lot easier to bring down your walls of defense and are able to interact with people in a more authentic way where you're not on defense. Yeah, just building mental fortitude through doing difficult things. That's why I chose this job, or a big reason why I chose this job is I wanted to prove to myself that I could do something very difficult and continue to do a difficult thing over time and to not allow myself to grow complacent or comfortable.
I try kind of doing a check-in almost every week to be like, okay, what do I have a game plan this coming week to do things that are going to be physically, mentally healthy, continue to invest in relationships, and not neglect the spiritual side of things as well.
Right.
And I think doing that, you can kind of find a lot of it is trial and error, honestly.
Right.
Where it's like you can't expect to be the best at something or just figure something out instantly. So a lot of it is trying, like maybe like for myself, like I live in a climate where we have sometimes 6 months of heavy snow, cold winters.
Right.
And I knew that I needed to be exercising. But I was just like, gosh, I probably would like cross-country skiing, but I hate the idea of taking the skis, putting them in my car, driving somewhere, unpacking, getting geared up, going to exercise, coming back to my car, taking all the gear off, putting it back in my car, driving back to my house. And like, I was just like, this is too much. Too much work to do something But I ride my bike all the time in the summer.
Right.
So I ended up buying a winter bike.
Mm.
So I was like, oh, I recognize that I just ride my bicycle normally all the time. So I'll just continue to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's like having conversations with people if you're an external processor to like figure some strategies out. But honestly, like even something as simple as saying hi to someone you normally wouldn't might be a good first step you could try this week.
Absolutely.
Like to just start. Because a lot of this is, I'll stick with the winter theme.
Mm-hmm.
If you start with a small snowball and start rolling it down a hill, we've all seen the cartoons where that turns into an entire avalanche.
Yeah.
Maybe that just saying hi to someone that normally you'd be like, I don't really want to talk to them. Not asking you to talk to them. Just say hi.
Mm-hmm.
Just smile and nod. That could be the snowball that eventually starts an avalanche. And we don't know what the avalanche is. Maybe that person becomes a friend. Maybe you just change as a person and become more like Jesus. I think either way, it's a positive direction to head.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Caleb, for stopping by.
Absolutely.
It was fun
Thank
to talk
you.
to you.
It was very fun.
Thank you for joining us. You can support the show by going to our Patreon page at patreon.com/story516. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. We look forward to seeing you next time.